With all the injuries for the New Orleans Pelicans, is the season already lost? I'll tell you why it's not as bad as you may think, and a way the Pelicans should start using Brandon Ingram to get back to winning ways. It's the Friday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Friday, big weekend coming up for the New Orleans Pelicans with a back-to-back against the Denver Nuggets in the Los Angeles Lakers. They don't win both of those. Is the season basically over? We're going to look at that in the first segment of today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Then I want to get into a creative way to use Brandon Ingram that maybe gets you a couple of wins here. And then the City Edition uniform is out. I actually really like it. We'll break that all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast for a reason, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everyday. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. And if you're an everydayer, still rocking with me, still rocking with the team, let me know in the comments down below. And by the way, Locked On Pelicans has a daily newsletter. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. So let's get into this right now. Things are feeling pretty bleak for the New Orleans Pelicans. They're on a 6-game losing streak, which is tied for the longest losing streak in the NBA currently, along with the Washington Wizards, who absolutely stink. They're currently 3-9, and they sit 14th out of 15 in the Western Conference. It's not looking good, right? And with all of the injuries that they have, when we don't know when basically any of the other guys are returning, other than Hawkins, who's probably returning sooner rather than later, it feels rough, right? No Zion Williamson for 4 to 6 weeks, and he never hits those timelines in the first place. We'll see if this year's any different, but that's not an encouraging start. You have CJ McCollum out, Dejaunte Murray, the big offseason acquisition, already out, and Murray's injury particularly hurts. You need that point guard to try and kind of run your offense, run your team, and now you don't have that, and you also gave up depth to get him. You know, you basically had to get rid of Najee Marshall because of cost, but then also Dyson Daniels, who's playing incredibly well for Atlanta, and Larry Nance Jr. Those were 3 really important pieces. So not only do you not have Murray, you don't have the pieces you traded away for him either, and that's kind of killing this team right now. You know, I joked and tweeted out a lineup that was on the court yesterday, and you look at that and you go, who are those guys? And it's like, oh yeah, that was in the middle of a competitive game. Because that's just kind of where the Pelicans are. So if we don't know when these guys are coming back, is the season basically already over? And maybe last year we wouldn't be asking this question because the draft wasn't that good. But this is, by all accounts, supposed to be an absolutely loaded draft. And that's something that's worth considering. Tanking is a very real thing in the NBA, and it's something that can really boost you up very, very quickly. And it's headlined by Cooper Flagg, you know, a 17-year-old playing over at Duke he's 18, looks incredible. And this is someone who, is just going to be really good in the NBA. You kind of know that. And there's a number of other players up there that are going to be really good, it feels like. So if you're ever going to just be bad, this is probably the year to do it. So if you go 0-2 this weekend and you fall to 3-11 on an 8-game losing streak, does that effectively mean the season is over? And I'm going to say it means we will have the conversation next week, certainly, if that's the case. But I don't think it necessarily means that the season is over. Before these games are played, the Pelicans are just 3 games back of being tied for the 8th seed 4 games back from being tied for the 8th seed in the Western Conference. They're 3 games back of the 10th spot right now. They're certainly still in contention for this. Now, if you keep losing and you don't make up ground there, it's not going to do you any good. That 3 games could turn into 5, could turn into 8, whatever that number could be. I think right now they're not going to tank. They're not thinking about that, and they're hopeful that they can make a late run. And there's a couple of things historically that are on their side for this and that they're going to be pointing at. They started 3-16 in Willie Green's first year, and they still made the playoffs. Now, that was a different year in the West, and they made the playoffs through the play-in tournament. That same record wouldn't get you into the play-in tournament last year, probably won't get you into the play-in tournament this year. But this team is far more talented than that team was. And I do think this team feels that if they do get healthy, they can go on a run and, get maybe to 500, which is about what it's going to take to get to the play-in tournament here, I think. They're within the realm of possibility, right? I don't think that's an unreasonable thing when they're fully healthy to expect. Shouldn't mean we should expect it, but I think it's one of those things that, that's reasonable. The other part about them not tanking is that could mean people lose their jobs. If the decision to tank is made, and this ends up becoming a lost season a la the Memphis Grizzlies last year, where they were decimated by injuries, John Morant suspension, and all of those things, David Griffin could get fired. Willie Green could get fired. They're not going to want that type of situation here. They don't want to commit to kind of the youth movement, lose games, just shut people down and be like, well, we'll try next year. So they may not be around next year. I don't know if they should or should not fire him just yet on those sorts of things. But that's going to be something that's a realistic possibility. So that likely means this team is just not going to tank. There's a risk to that. That could mean that, let's be competitive and try and win games. And when they get healthy, there's enough talent here that means you won't end up with a bottom 5 pick, particularly when you look at the overall standings here and some of the teams that we expect to be real bad. The Washington Wizards are going to be pretty bad this year. The Utah Jazz are going to be pretty bad this year. I think Charlotte will be as well. Toronto should be pretty bad as well. Philly will get better. The Bucks will get better, I think. But overall, when you look at this, it's going to be tough for New Orleans to end up with a top 5 pick. Are they going to be better than Detroit at the end of the year? Yeah, probably if this team gets healthy. But if you go 0-2 here and you're not competitive in any of them and you don't know when that next win is going to come and these guys are on the longer end of the injuries, you might unintentionally tank. And there definitely will be a break point where, you've got to kind of go for it. So in a sense, I do think this weekend is a little bit make or break for the New Orleans Pelicans just based on the way the West is going to go. The West is better than it was a couple of years ago. It's pretty brutal this year as is. Being 10 games under 500, you're not going to get into the play-in tournament. And if that's where you're kind of projecting yourself to go for, that's not a situation you want to be in. The worst thing you could do is end up with the 10th pick in the draft, right? Now, it's a good draft. You'll get someone there. But the Bucks likely, you're not going to get their top 4 protected pick. They're going to get better. They've already kind of moved and gotten out of the bottom there with 2 straight wins. So you have the Pelicans and then a bunch of other teams that are probably going to be ahead of them. Now, the lottery odds are different than they've been in the past, right? The number 1 overall pick, the odds are flattened a little bit so that you have a better chance of getting them, and it's to disincentivize tanking along with the the play-in tournament, and that's done a good job. But at a certain point, it's you actually do not want to end up with the 10th, 11th, 9th pick in this draft when you could get a top 5 and have a better chance at that. I don't think we're there just yet, but it's a conversation we probably need to have, I think, here. And 2 losses here is definitely going to send the Pelicans on that direction. If you're looking at 3-11, you're not in a good spot, and that is, even though it's only 8 games, with 60 plus to go, 65 plus games to go, that's a tough hole to climb out of. And that's something that's worth keeping in mind when it comes. There's still 70 games to go. You're 4 games back, 3 games back of a spot you want to be in. Sure. But as long as that grows or doesn't change, you need to win and other teams need to lose. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be realistic for New Orleans. So this weekend is pretty important when it comes to what's the rest of the season going to look like. And you have tough teams here. The Denver Nuggets, the Los Angeles Lakers. I said in yesterday's show, and you should listen to this if you haven't already, there's a way to beat those teams. Maybe going after offensive boards and second chance points because they're not particularly strong rebounding teams over there. Maybe they can get you a win. Maybe another way to get a win is a different way to use Brandon Ingram, and in a way you might not think. Let's look at that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn a very liberal rate of 4.25 APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And now your favorite podcast has a newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter, one stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Today's article in there by Katie Heindel was really good about defensive strategies you're seeing more and more in the NBA. We talked about full court press the other day and how teams are doing it against New Orleans. That's a league-wide trend, and it's in there in the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. You get a league-wide article. You get my Pelicans article as well every single day. It's really awesome. Just go to lockedondaily.com, scroll down, click on the Locked On Pelicans logo, and you can sign up right there, and it's going to be coming to your inbox Monday through Friday. So go check out lockedondaily.com and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. So let's get into Brandon Ingram here. Honestly, I think Brandon has been really good this year, just doing what he can. There's limitations here, right? He struggled in the playoffs, but he's doing what he can here and playing better. He's taking more threes. You're seeing those numbers trend in the right direction, and I'm pretty pleased. He's averaging 6.8 three-point attempts per game. That's almost 7. He's doing what's asked of him. 22.5 points per game. He's shooting it pretty well. You know, the passing has been really, really good at 5.1 assists per game, and that's what I want to get into here. One of the things you saw in part of the issue against that game against OKC was they could defend him pretty easily. And go back to the Brooklyn Nets game too, the crunch time woes that this team had, which were really almost unforgivable in my opinion. But it started with the Pelicans just running a high pick and roll. Brandon Ingram with the ball, the top of the three-point line, someone who knows who comes and sets a screen. They kind of flare off from that. And then it's Brandon Ingram. Basically, you're trying to get him on a weaker defender, let him go one-on-one and isolate to the basket. And it's not working. It's not working at all, right? They didn't score for the final 3.5 minutes, despite multiple timeouts called in that game against the Brooklyn Nets. You saw him struggle in the second half against OKC, where he just wasn't doing a whole lot, it felt like. That's not gonna work here. You've got to find ways to get Brandon Ingram going, because this is the person, for better or worse, that is going to need to lead you. And I think he's doing, again, a very good job of this, all things considered. This team has no other threats. And we went into this yesterday about the turnovers for the everydayers here. And if you're not one, become one, because you'll understand what I'm talking about. And that's, when you don't have other threats there, it's easy to double team Brandon Ingram. And anyone's going to really struggle when there's a double. And there's just not guys to make opponents pay for doing that. But is there a way to use Brandon Ingram more creatively that at least frees him up and maybe makes other guys easier threats? And I do think there is. And this is something that Brandon Ingram is particularly good at, but not something that the Pelicans use enough. And truthfully, that is posting up Brandon Ingram. Get him on the low block. Get him the ball kind of down there, in the dunker, not the dunker spot exactly, a little bit further up than that, but on the left or right of the paint, and get him the ball and let him post up or survey the court from those positions. Don't start him up at the three-point line right now. That's been too easy to defend, and it doesn't particularly work. From the low post situation, Brandon Ingram can either turn around and just take a mid-range jumper, and look, at this point, while I don't love that, what other kind of offense is there at the moment? So screw it, do it. Just whatever's going to get some points on the board here. Now, say they take that away, or he's covered by someone taller, or they're locking him up. He can pass out of there, right? When he's down that low with the ball, they're going to potentially send 2 at him. They're going to throw 2 guys and commit 2 guys, because that's a spot where he can score and can be a threat from, and they don't want that. When you throw that 2 at him, other people can move. And it's one thing when you're on the perimeter and there's 2 guys on you there, because then you've got to make longer passes. It's other guys you're just kind of keeping the ball on the perimeter and there's nothing going on in the paint here. But if you have him on the low block and someone cuts down because they were open and Ingram can make that pass, that's a guy that's now cutting and right at the rim and able to score. And Ingram has been such a good passer this year that I think this is maybe the way to go. The way Antonio Daniels would describe this, let's use our friend of the show here, and we need to get him on the show soon, is, what teams are doing is putting Brandon Ingram in their arena where they want him to be. And that's probably at the 3-point line, trying to drive on an ISO, lose the ball, something like that. Put the defenders in Brandon Ingram's arena where he has more tools available to him. And I like this idea. Get him with his back to the basket, try and draw 2, and then have someone cut. You saw the Pelicans sometimes do this with Jonas Valanciunas the past couple of years. Throw the ball in. If he draws a double team, someone's open, have them cut, pass them the ball, score pretty easily. Something along those lines. Or they cut, get the ball, a defender rotates over for help, and then they kick it out to an open 3-point shooter, something that's been happening to New Orleans a lot right now when they struggle to contain that dribble penetration. Kind of create all of that without the dribbling. That's going to cut down on turnovers. Ingram's handle's been a little bit loose at times this year. That is going to help cut down on turnovers when he's not needing to bounce the ball as much or move as much. Put him in an advantageous spot, get him the ball there, and let him go to work doing what he feels he needs to do. I trust him as a passer with this sort of thing. And when you've watched him this year, the passing, this has been on point. I need to do a film breakdown of this, and we'll put it on YouTube. It'll be fun. I'll figure out if there's a way to make that really work too, just audio on the podcast side. But if you look at some of the head fakes and little things he's doing like that, it's really opening up passing lanes and getting defenders to bite just from some real little looks. And one of the things is he has a very good sense of court awareness when he's out there. Some of the passes you've seen him make this year, you're like, how did he see the guy? How did he know that was happening there? And he just does, whether it's court awareness, whether it's chemistry with his teammates, what have you. He's really good at surveying the court, kind of knowing where guys are and making the right read in terms of a pass. Put him in a spot where he can kind of see everything a little bit more, and then guys can rotate around him and move around him too. This is also something that you can do when they force the ball out of his hands. You saw it against OKC that they didn't want Brandon Ingram to beat him, so they would get the ball out of his hands a lot, and then they would just deny it to him ever again. So they were trying to get it to him on the perimeter, and that led to a lot of turnovers and things like that. Just post him up and get him the ball down there. Simple as that, right? Let's just cut down on some of the mistakes that the team could do. I think this will help with turnovers. I think it'll help Brandon Ingram score. I think it'll open others up as well. I don't know if this team is a real good 3-point shooting team while some of these guys are out injured right now. When Hawkins isn't playing, when CJ isn't there, when Murray isn't there, is this a good 3-point shooting team? And I'm not sure that the answer is yes. And truthfully, it hasn't been great at times. They did not shoot the 3 ball well the other night. 3-point percentage, they're 21st in the league right now. I think this is going to generate open looks. Maybe that helps you with that. But also just get guys attacking the paint, getting them closer to the basket and trying to score that way. And that's something that's been a bit of an issue all season long for New Orleans. Look, you don't have your main guys. You're going to need to get a little bit more creative to try and go out and do it because you're not going to win with just talent alone. That's why they need to go after the offensive glass and try and win that battle and see if they can get some second chance points. And this team does have the makings of being a very good offensive rebounding team. They're 5th in the league when it comes to offensive rebound percentage. They're getting about 30% of their own misses. That's a really good number. So essentially, 1 out of every 3 misses, you're getting yourself, and you can put that back up for a score. That's going to help offense. Using Brandon Ingram in an area that's more advantageous for him, that limits the potential for turnovers, is something that's going to help too. The Pelicans have been turning the ball over a lot. They're 20th when it comes to that. They're turning the ball over on 13.6% of their possessions. Those aren't good numbers. Cut that down. Give yourself easier chances to score, make other guys threats, and that should just open things up for this team. And look, he can definitely play this way. We've seen it. And look, at that point, at least he's got a mid-range jumper. Look, I don't love it, but maybe that's all that you have right now. What do you think about the strategy? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm curious what your take is, but they've got to do something to try and generate some more offense and get back into some of these games and get back to winning ways. Offensive rebounding, Brandon Ingram on the low block, post-up situations, I think is something they really need to try rather than just the hang out on the perimeter stuff that they've been doing. So coming up next, let's get into the fashion side of things. The new City Edition jerseys are out. I like all of it. I like that. I like the merch. We're going to talk about that. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL and NBA action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NBA all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you realize the momentum's going a certain way. The odds are always being updated. Jump on those new lines because you can take advantage. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And all you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. You're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Right now, in this game tonight, the Denver Nuggets are -6.5, favored by 6.5. Pelicans keep it closer than that, they get blown out again. That's your line. $5 bet on that, you win $150 in bonus bets, and that's only at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And now for your second listen, Locked On Saints. Host Ross Jackson making sense of everything black and gold with a new head coach, new energy, guys coming back from injury. Ross Jackson telling you everything you need to know over at the Locked On Saints podcast. Make that your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's get into, let's put on our sartorial hats. Is that what it is? Let's be fancy. Let's be posh. Let's talk fashion here with the Pelicans' new City Edition uniform. We'd seen some leaks from these already, but honestly, I really like these. I always think the early leaks of City Edition and alternate jerseys don't look good because you don't see the numbers on it, and you need to see it with the numbers. It's always lacking the numbers. So in these jerseys, you see, the NOLA on there, but you don't see the 1, the 5, the 14, the 3, the 2 for Herb Jones. All of those are kind of important, I think, to making the jersey look good and make sense, and it just feels like it's missing something. So I'll give you the press release here because I actually like these, truthfully. They're just, what I like about these is they're just different. I loved the black one last year. I like the dark purple this year. I like the bones on it. I like the colors, all of that. This one, they say, is inspired by New Orleans nightlife and culture. The new uniforms feature an updated color palette, including vibrant purple and bright green, representing the glowing lights and energy of New Orleans nightlife. The addition of gold and dark purple further elevates the design, blending traditional elements with modern flair. Sure, some of the things that I kind of like, I just dig the colors. That neon green and that kind of royal dark purple, whatever you're calling it, is just different. There's no other color scheme like that in the NBA, and that's what I think is so great. We all like the red uniforms for the Pelicans because they pop, they stand out. Just visually, they're kind of striking, whereas the blues and the whites just aren't. They kind of feel bland. They haven't been refreshed since basically the team became the Pelicans and rebranded. I like this color scheme. I like the scallion. It's just different, and I kind of like leaning into the kind of like voodoo, bayou, swampy aspect of everything, even if that's a little bit kitschy and isn't like what New Orleans is all about. But I do think these are pretty good. They say the colors and patterns here, the design's primary colors, vibrant purple and bright green, are a nod to the energy of New Orleans streets after dark, while the introduction of gold and dark purple gives the uniform a more refined edge. The new herringbone pattern woven into the fabric is a subtle yet powerful tribute to the city's culture. Sure, you got little like bones all over it. I think it's kind of fun with the way that it looks. Something to also keep in mind here with some of this is there's a few things different that we haven't seen before. The waistband logo on the shorts features a partial version of the Crescent City basketball logo. You know the one I'm talking about where, I'm not going to show it here, where it's got that like crescent over the basketball below it and then kind of an outline around it. Here, they've turned that little basketball into like a more bone-looking thing. They call it they skeletonized it to make it kind of fit and complement the unique skeleton design featured on the shorts. The Pelican kind of rendered with the bones, that's really there too. The jock tag on it, which you don't really see because these are, tucked into the jerseys and everything. What's really cool about this is it spells New Orleans out basically in a bone font. I just dig them, y'all. Like, they're just different. They're fun. I'm going to be buying a Herb Jones one of these because I want a Herb Jones jersey. I like this. It's so different. You haven't seen something like this before. I think the green really stands out. Like, overall, I think they're really, really good. I think the gold could be a little bit more gold. It looks kind of tan to me. That's really like my only complaint when it comes to them. I think they look good. Like, I think they look really, really good, and they're pretty fun, and I'm excited to see these out there on the court when they start breaking these out, which is going to be later in the year here. I think they're pretty fun. The first game that they're going to wear them is versus Toronto on November 27th. And that's also going to have the debut of the newly designed 2024-2025 City Edition court. So it's that one that we saw after the in-season tournament last year. I like this. I fully support rebranding to these colors and the skeleton logo. Even if you didn't do it the skeleton and you just did that normal Pelican logo, but in these colors, I would support it. I just think they're so different. It's so unique. It's not just another blue, white, and red, which is all over the league. This is something that I think can be its own identity here. I dig them. Like, they're, in a sense, kind of like garish, and I like that. Just give me kind of something different, and I think that's why it was such a big hit last year. The Pelicans had that Black City Edition jersey. This is pretty good, too. I like the merch. The hoodies look really good. Truthfully, I like everything they've done. I like the hats that are in that entire neon green. Like, you can stand out. You can pop here. It's pretty fun. Something to keep in mind that I teased on Twitter, even though we might be moving to blue skies soon, is the Pierre hat this year. The Pierre hat that you can see behind me that's hanging here, that they give out every year. The past couple of years, it's probably like the most coveted giveaway. It's going to look different than this guy does this past year. Keep that in mind. You see the green and the purple on there? It's a whole lot more purple on this guy than they've had in years before. It's actually going to be pretty fun. It's going to be really different. It's going to complement, I think, and match a little bit more of these City Edition jerseys. That's going to be a good giveaway when they have that out there. So maybe they're leaning into this more. I don't know if a full rebrand or anything like that is coming, but I support it. I like all this. I eat it up. It's working on me. The marketing, the advertising, the difference here. You'll probably catch me in New Orleans wearing a Herb Jones jersey at some point. That's one of these purple ones. All right, let me know what you think about the jerseys. Good, bad, support a rebrand. Tell me what you think in the comments down below. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. This week, maybe, of Locked On Pelicans. I might do a bonus show after the game on Saturday night. I have a better setup to try and go live from the court. It wasn't working before. I have something that should work now. So I'm excited about that. So we'll try and set all of that up and do some more for y'all. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This has been the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. See y'all next time.